latest reports from the world's second largest continent. Hello, I'm Alyson Grange. A very warm welcome from Durban, South Africa. We get you the news and the newsmakers from Africa. From elections to climate change to innovations and opportunities. As the world's attention shifts, we report from Africa, the heart of the global south. Join me every weekday live on First Post. Hello and welcome to First Post Africa, where we get you the top stories from the continent and from across the world. I'm Alyson Grange, coming to you live from Durban, South Africa. First, let's take a look at the headlines. Iran's Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei hails his country's victory over Israel and says it dealt the US a severe slap in his first public statement since a ceasefire ended 12 days of war earlier this week. India's Defence Minister Rajnath Singh refuses to sign the Shanghai Cooperation Organization joint statement, citing its failure to address India's concerns on cross-border terrorism and the Pahalgam attack that killed 26. Myanmar's junta chief says elections will be held in December and January, despite international monitors calling them a sham. The military seized power in a 2021 coup, ousting the civilian government and sparking a civil war. A stampede during high school exams in Central African Republic's capital, Bangui, kills at least 29 students. The tragedy was triggered by an electricity transformer explosion. And 6 people have died from floods sweeping through China's Guizhou province after more than 80,000 people were forced to flee from their homes this week. Hello and welcome. Our top focus today remains on Kenya. The East African nation is in the grip of violence as anti-government protests turn deadly once again. Yesterday, thousands of Kenyans took to the streets. They were marking 1 year since the deadliest day of last year's protests, when at least 19 people were killed. This was the same day when Kenyans invaded parliament. But what was meant to be a memorial turned into a tragic chapter. At least 16 people have reportedly been killed after clashes broke out between protesters and the police. According to Amnesty Kenya, most of the victims were killed by police as they were shot dead. Visuals from the scene show chaotic standoffs, police firing rubber bullets, live ammunition, and using water cannons. At least 400 people were reportedly injured, including protesters, police officers, and journalists. At least 61 people have been arrested.
Enough is enough! This is a nation! This is not a forest! Enough is enough, Kenya!
We are here for justice.
We are here for change! It's time for us to get our nation! The blood that we have shed is enough! There is no blood left in our flag anymore!
They are involved in extrajudicial killings. They are involved in enforced disappearances, and they are involved in, kidnapping people and abducting people. And we've seen some people turn up dead. So this must end.
Much of the unrest unfolded in the heart of the capital, Nairobi, where some protesters called for the occupation of President William Ruto's residence. Some demonstrators ripped up flagstones to hurl at police. Others chanted for the president to step down. A few even charged at security forces. Businesses in Nairobi suffered after looting and arson broke out in several places.
So hard. It's so hard. By the way, it's so hard. One my problem is no job for now. No job for now. Look, everything is the ban. Yeah, so please, government, try talking of the Gen Z, because all this is happening because of Gen Z. So please, Gen Z, just try to sit down then to talk to the government.
But the violence wasn't confined to the capital. Protests were reported in at least 23 counties, including major cities like Mombasa.
Have extrajudicial killings going on. We are losing people every day. It is becoming a massacre in Kenya.
On this same day last year, that is the 25th of June, young Kenyans had stormed Parliament in a protest against proposed tax hikes by President Ruto. Now, those demonstrations sparked a months-long anti-government movement. A total of over 60 people were killed in last year's unrest. President Ruto was eventually forced to roll back the tax hikes, but public dissent didn't die down. Kenyans already struggling with economic woes have also been angered by an escalating government crackdown. Since last year's protests, at least 80 government critics have gone missing. But yesterday's demonstrations were not just about the past. Protesters also mourned the recent death of blogger and teacher Albert Ojwang. Ojwang died in police custody earlier this month after being arrested for criticizing the deputy police chief online. 6 people, including 3 police officers, have been charged with his murder. Though President Ruto has expressed sympathy for the protesters, he has stood firmly behind the police. Critics accuse him of dragging Kenya back to the dark days of dictatorship, with unrest and violence now a regular sight on the streets of democratic Kenya. How will this turbulence shape the nation's future? To discuss further, we have with us Faith Adhiambo, the president of the Law Society of Kenya. Thank you for being with us, Faith.
Hello.
Now, what are the root causes behind the recurring anti-government protests in Kenya? And how have the recent policy decisions, such as the controversial tax bill, fueled public outrage?
Well, actually, this year, the bill wasn't so much of a big issue. The issue was the budget. In terms of budgetary allocation to important sectors that the Gen Zs had raised the previous year, such as free primary education, better facilitation of the public universities, healthcare, amongst others, that they had identified, and where the government is actually investing its money. And so, irrespective of the promises that were made in the previous year, the budget is not reflecting at the end of the day, the promises that were made by the head of the state. And so Kenyans were agitated about that. However, what sparked demonstrations even before the anniversary of 25th is the killing of Mr. Albert Ojwang, because we've had protests before because of that. And they only spiraled to build up today to what happened yesterday. And so Albert Ojwang was tortured and gruesomely murdered. Then even at Albert's protest, there was another protester who was selling masks, who was shot at close range, direct range by a police officer, who was not provoking the police, was standing at the corner, and he was only selling masks. And the 2 police officers just approached him and shot him. And he also died. Albert is currently brain dead. And so these are things that have escalated already, the simmering dissent and discontent, because Parliament went ahead and passed the budget. And thereafter, the seemingly refusal for proper investigations, there were tampering of the evidence in Albert's case, the aggravation of killing of people following that very next demonstration calling for justice. Thereafter, a young girl as well was raped and killed, and police officers also shot some of the protesters that were protesting the killing of the young girl. And so these have precipitated the kind of anger that we see here today.
Yes. And Faith, how does the use of lethal force by the police during these demonstrations reflect the state of civil liberties and the rule of law in Kenya, especially in light of the similar incidents in the past protests, as you've mentioned?
Well, the police are not learning from what has been happening. And so irrespective of the fact that the Gen Zs continue to raise concerns, youth, even parents, the church, even international community have tried to raise concern about what's happening in the country. But more and more we see the government applying force, because when they go out on the streets, they are met with live bullets, tear gas canisters, rubber bullets. And if they go on social media, they are arrested and drowned in court cases. And so there's no ventilation that is allowed to them to express themselves or raise any concern. And that the anger eventually explodes. And we are not seeing a police force that is learning from its previous mistakes in terms of being more restrained. And unfortunately, we have seen even unfortunate events of even police officers being beaten and injured this time, which was not prevalent then. But the anger, and because a lot of the protesters this time even feel that as they go to the protests, be ready to die. And so even before the protest, we had a lot of them discussing and saying their eulogies or how they want to be cremated or how they want to be buried, because a lot of them felt that the moment they get onto the streets, they should expect a bullet to their head.
Faith, thank you very much for being with us on Firstpost Africa.
Thank you.
And now let's talk about Ukraine's new push in Africa. Kiev is not just fighting Russia on the battlefield, but also competing with Moscow thousands of kilometers away in Africa. In a region where Russia has long held influence, Ukraine too is trying to gain visibility. Mauritania, on Africa's western edge, is now home to a new Ukrainian embassy. It oversaw food aid deliveries to refugees from neighboring Mali and said the aid officials, Ukraine is also reportedly offering to train Mauritanian soldiers, saying that it could share the technologies and experience it has made on the battlefield against Russia. Ukraine's proposal came amid tensions between Mauritania and Mali over the growing impact of terrorism in the Sahel region. In Mali, the government is fighting Tuareg rebels in the north, and they are getting support from Russian forces and mercenaries. Across the border, Ukraine is offering to train Mauritanian forces. Now, that's the kind of rivalry that is unfolding in West Africa. That is Ukraine's strategy to expand its footprint. Since Russia's invasion in 2022, it has opened 8 embassies in the continent. Ukraine is trying to strengthen trade as well as diplomatic ties with African nations. Now, many of them still remember Russian support in the Cold War and its stance against apartheid. Now, Ukraine's Africa-centric strategy came after many African nations declined to take Kiev's side at the United Nations, even as Russia's bombing of Ukraine pushed up prices of food and fertilizer. Moscow soldiers and mercenaries guard presidents in several Western and Central African countries. Additionally, Russian mining companies are heavily invested in the Sahel region, including in Mali. Now, earlier this month, the Kremlin said Russia would increase cooperation with African countries, and this would also include sensitive areas like defense. Russia is reportedly the largest weapons supplier to Africa. Ukraine's special envoy for the West Africa and West Asia, Maxim Subk, has said that the Russian military presence undermines the region's stability. Subk has been appointed to lead the Ukrainian initiative in the region, as opposed to Russia's military heavy approach. Ukraine is focusing on winning African allies with food. Kiev said it sent nearly 300,000 tons of aid to Africa. This aid was distributed through the World Food Programme under an EU and US finance scheme called Grain from Ukraine. Ukrainian aid has reached 8 million people across 12 African countries. The plan rivals a similar Russian food aid plan for Africa. Now, Ukraine's bid to expand its presence goes further. Ukraine exported nearly 10 million tons of grain to Africa in 2024. This was almost double the previous year's export. The massive export marked Ukraine's bid to show that it is a major alternative to Russian food supplies. Russia and Ukraine seem to have opened another front in their war, and this one is about a power tussle to establish influence in a faraway region, with Kiev hoping to win over the African nations that have so far maintained neutrality. And shifting focus to Zambia, where a row over the funeral of a former president refuses to die down. Days after Edgar Lungu's death, contention over his last rites continues to top headlines. In the latest twist, a South African judge halted his burial while his funeral service was underway yesterday. The move marked an escalation in the standoff between the Zambian government and Lungu's family. A Gauteng Region High Court judge ruled that both parties had agreed that Lungu would not be buried until a case over the location of the funeral was resolved. The next hearing in the case is scheduled for the 4th of August. Now, if you are wondering, what does a South African court have to do with the death of a Zambian president, then here's a little backstory for you. Now, Lungu died on the 5th of June while seeking medical care in South Africa. After his death, the Zambian president, Hakainde Hichilema, sought to lead a state funeral for his predecessor. An initial 7 days of mourning was announced. It was then extended by another 9 days, ending on the 23rd of June. But Lungu's family blocked his remains from being repatriated. Lungu's family claimed that he would not have wanted Hichilema at his funeral. The family declared that Lungu's funeral and burial will take place in South Africa in a private ceremony by the family's wishes. Now, that did not sit well with the president. Hichilema cut short the extended national mourning. The Zambian government moved the court to stop the burial in South Africa. This back and forth between the Zambian government and the Lungu family stems from the political rivalry between the two leaders. Hichilema defeated Lungu in 2021, and that ended the rule of the Patriotic Front Party. Since then, Lungu's wife and children have been charged with corruption. They were also accused of possessing suspected proceeds of crime. The former president's daughter, Cecilia Lungu, was arrested in February on charges of money laundering. In 2024, she was detained with her mother and sister for alleged fraud. Now, Lungu's son, Dalitso, too, is also facing corruption charges. Lungu's family claims that these accusations and charges are a part of a political vendetta. This deep-rooted political rivalry has ruined one of the most personal moments of any leader's life. While the battle between the two sides continues, Lungu's funeral remains on hold with his supporters in grief. And here's a fresh brew from the world of coffee. Africa has a new top coffee exporter. Uganda has now claimed the top spot, taking over Ethiopia. The country long celebrated as the birthplace of coffee. The announcement comes from Uganda's Ministry of Agriculture. In May this year, Uganda exported over 793,000 bags of coffee. That's about 47,600 metric tons and around 5 billion cups of coffee. The shipment earned Uganda a whopping $243 million. Ethiopia, by comparison, exported over 43,000 tons in the same month. So, a new leader in Africa's coffee trade is brewing. Ethiopia, though, is still the heartbeat of coffee culture. Legend said that coffee was discovered in its Kafar region. It is the genetic home of Arabica coffee, the world's most popular coffee bean. Now, Ethiopian coffee is a staple in specialty markets. It's also the country's top export, employing millions and powering the economy. Now, Ethiopia ranks among the top 5 coffee producers globally, behind Brazil, Vietnam, Colombia, and Indonesia. It also sits in the top 10 exporters worldwide, and until recently was Africa's #1 exporter. But Uganda has been catching up fast. It was right behind Ethiopia on the production list last year, and now it's jumped ahead in exports. Uganda has been ranked 14th in export value as per some reports, but that might be about to change. Uganda credits its coffee surge to strategic reforms and grassroots efforts to boost quality and output. Government policies, farmer training, and better farming inputs have transformed the sector. Production and exports have seen steady and strong growth, and with these initiatives, coffee is also emerging as Uganda's golden bean. It is supporting millions of farmers across the country. It fuels livelihoods, builds rural economies, and shapes communities. From smallholder plots to expanding estates, coffee is everywhere, and it's becoming a symbol of national pride. Exports head to markets worldwide, from Italy, Germany, and Spain, to India, the US, Sudan, China, and beyond. With the main harvest underway, volumes are expected to rise even more in the months ahead. And Uganda is thinking big. It is aiming to produce 20 million bags a year by the year 2030. And it's not just about quantity. Uganda wants a spot in the premium coffee market too, with both Arabica and Robusta in the mix. So Africa may just be raising a new coffee giant. Uganda's rise in the global coffee trade isn't just a spike. It is the result of years of grind and good strategy. And if the momentum holds, Uganda may soon be pouring its way into the very top tier of coffee nations. And that's it on the show for today. We will see you again tomorrow at the same time. Thank you for watching, and goodbye.